Dear class, this is a brief video that will help you use evidence in explaining your answers about the text. Using evidence in this course is a vital skill. Please make sure to watch this video and adjust how you use evidence in the future. This will really help you develop key essential writing skills that will increase your chances of success in this course and college in general.
So, if you look at what we're doing this week, right, first we're going to discuss this writing tip for using evidence. Then we'll look at what we're going to complete this week. Then we'll look at the discussion for the third play we've read from Zetta Elliott called Self-Preservation. And then what to do for our class on Wednesday. So that's our agenda for today, what we're going to be discussing. As always, if any questions pop up, feel free to use the little hand icon and type it in the chat, or switch on your mic and ask the question with your voice. Okay, so first thing we want to do today is have a brief discussion about what it means to use evidence to back up your claims when you write. Right. A claim is any assertion or statement of an idea. Right? So whenever you write and you say something almost about anything that you believe is true, what you're doing is making a claim. You're saying that X is Y. You know, this means that. You're making an assertion of an idea. Even if that assertion of an idea is about a play, a book, whatever, it's still a basic claim. You use claims all the time. And thinking about writing as sort of a series of claims or assertions of an idea that you're making can really help you understand how you have to support those ideas to make an effective argument, or to, in our cases, answer a writing quiz effectively. So whenever you make a claim, you always have to then support that claim via evidence. Now, in your other writing classes, you might have a range of evidence that you're using to support a claim. It might be data or facts or experiments from a lab report, 900 million things. In this class, the evidence that you will be using most often will be your interpretation of the text. The play, the poems, what have you. Now, this structure of supporting a claim with evidence is sort of universal, so it doesn't matter if you're using it to argue for an interpretation of a text, or you're using it to prove a lab report, or to write a history paper. Same basic structure. Okay, so you can take this structure and use it in almost any of your other classes, and it will more or less be what the professor is looking for you to do. So, a claim is your idea. You can support it either via summarized evidence. This is evidence that you paraphrase and put into your own words. Right? But it's still relating to and directly referencing something written in the text, even if you're putting it in your own words. And number two is direct evidence, which is quotation. Okay? Now, you do not have to do both types of evidence in one paragraph. You don't have to do them at one time. Oftentimes, though, in a paper, you'll mix them, but you don't have to. The key part is remembering that if you're providing me a quote, all right, that is something where you have to then explain to me what the quote means. All right, so whenever you're directly quoting from a text, you have to explain to me how that defends your claim, how that proves what you say about the text. And one of the things that, as you go back and look over your writing quiz scores and my comments and your discussion boards and my comments, one of the things that, if I'm telling you you need to use more evidence, I'm talking about this sort of structure right here. Okay, and it's something that I would start practicing with this next round of writing quizzes that we're doing for this week, and discussion boards. So, let's look at an example of what I'm talking about, and I'll break down what it means to use evidence in a text. So, in the play Quality, the character of Eva is immediately judged by Jane, who assumes that the clothes with the leopard print panties that James describes as ghetto belong to her simply because she is black. This shows that Jane thinks Eva is also ghetto simply because she is black. Ghetto is a connotation that Jane uses to present her thoughts about the renters who she feels are dirty, dangerous, and of low value. The use of ghetto is an example of how Jane uses code words to signal her racism. However, we find out later that the clothes belong to Jeff, the person Jane least expected. As a society, Eliot's play shows us how every day we judge people for their racial identity before knowing them. So this is a student example from a previous class, and it's a pretty good one. And it's a good one because this student uses evidence to support their claims. All right. The central claim of this answer is right here, where no, don't do that. Is right here where the student argues that Jane immediately judges the African American character of Eva, as we saw in the play from last week. So she then goes on to prove this claim by how thinking that the underwear belongs to Jane means that she thinks that Jane is ghetto. All right? And then after proving that Jane thinks Eva is ghetto, the student then goes on to explain what that word ghetto, means in terms of the play. All right? That for Jane, that use of the word ghetto is used to present her thoughts about the renters, who she feels, because they are people of color, are dirty, dangerous, and low value. They don't have high class. They're, the way that Jane believes the other people in the building who are renters are. Right? And then she ties it up by saying, here's how then this use of ghetto, as we saw presented in evidence, works in the play to kind of represent a theme that people like Jane oftentimes judge people's racial identity or judge people for who they are based on their race, essentially sort of racism. And if we look at how this student put together this answer in their writing quiz, see how, one, they provide both of examples from our evidence. First, they start off with a direct evidence, a quote. All right? Then they explain that quote, and then in their explanation of the quote, they also talk about a summarized piece of evidence, how Jane feels. So see how in the way that they're arguing for their point, they are turning to the text to say, here is how I can make this claim. Here's how I can say that the character of Jane in the play is essentially racist. All right, because she uses these code words. All right. Notice she didn't just say that generally. She pointed to specific moments in the text and then used those moments to prove her point. Some of you in the class are already doing this really well, and that's awesome. But it is something like as general as we move forward. Really start trying to use this method. All right. When you answer a writing quiz or you answer the prompt in a discussion board, already have in your head that you are going to make a claim about the text, and then you're going to support that claim by using some form of evidence, whether you're paraphrasing it or doing it directly from the text, and then you're going to explain that evidence. Okay, So, to make it real simple, you can think of using evidence as a three-step process. And you can do this every time. First step is your claim about the text. Next is the evidence you provide, whatever evidence you take from the text about your claim. And then three, this is the most important part, is your explanation of how this evidence proves your claim. So you can, every time that you are using evidence to answer a question, or you're using evidence in a paper, always think that I'm essentially kind of always asking you to do this three-step process. Make the claim about what's going on in the text, provide evidence that relates to that, and then explain how that evidence supports your idea. Right? And this is a super important piece of writing that will help you moving forward, not only in this class, but in any class where you have to do some form of evidence-based writing, whether it be a research paper, a textual analysis, whatever it may be. Right? If your professor is asking you to read something and then write about what you've read, or you have to go find information on a topic, read that information, and write about it, your professor wants you to use evidence more or less in this three-step process. Right? Have an idea about it, what you've read, show us the evidence where that idea shows up, and then explain how that evidence proves your own idea. Okay? This is a super important bit of the class, and next week when we talk about your papers, we're going to go over this again. And then, in the future, when we talk about it, we're going to go over it again. Like, this is one of the key sort of pillars of the class of English 111, is using this three-step process of evidence.